folks, it's William with Quarantine Studio, here once again in the studio. Now today I have a guest here. This is Death Becomes Her, and I have it in a kit form, as you can see here. This is the resin kit. This is one of the preliminary kits that we manufactured here locally before we sent them off to be mass produced. And so what I've done with this one, this was kind of a bad pull, and I hate to throw away resin, so I always just save these bad pulls and then put them up a little bit and fix them up for myself or for some friends or for demo. I think they make great pieces for demo just to practice on, things like that. But the reason I'm cutting this video is because I get a lot of questions, especially about this particular kit, but on a couple of the other kits that I've done in the past, about, well, this. A nice little leg here. I'm going to hold it a little closer to the camera. But as you can see, this is the Death Becomes Her leg. This is just one of them, obviously. And then we have some hose on her, some stockings. And so I always get questions about, well, William, how do you do this? How do you create this look? And actually, it's quite easy. And so that's going to be the process here. Now, everybody has their own technique for this. You know, they all come around to be about the same. So, you know, this technique may work for you. It does take a little bit of practice, but it's really not that bad. It's pretty simple, pretty easy, as I said. So let's dive in and take a look at creating a hosiery or sheer effect. In this case, it's going to be hose, but I also create this effect on her dress. Maybe a little bit different effect. The dress will be sheer, it will be white, but you know, it will be sheer over her. So how do we create that kind of sheer or semi-transparent, somewhat see-through appearance on clothing like this? So that's what we're going to do. Okay, so I'm back with the paint tutorial here on the Death Becomes Her here. And in this next step, what I have done is taken the raw resin and just coated it with some primer. Now, I personally like using automotive primer. It's lacquer based. It tends to etch into the resin as long as the resin has been cleaned really well. I use soap and water, and then I use denatured alcohol on it to wipe it down one last time, and then I hit it with the primer. And so I got a nice primer coat here. I just take a quick look over it, make sure I've got everything looking the way I want, no seams, no little blemishes or anything like that. If so, I clean those up, and then I'm ready to start painting. So the first thing you want to do in a case like this, so remember the effect that we're trying to achieve here is the sheer of the hose here. I'll also do this on her dress as well because it's supposed to be very sheer. So the first thing I want to do is just paint the flesh tone. So whatever it's going to be. Now in this case with our Death Becomes Her, she has kind of a greenish tint to her skin. And so instead of just painting just the area where I see the skin, I paint the entire leg. And that is the real trick to this. Whatever the flesh tone is going to be, go ahead and paint the entire piece that color. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back with another color over the top to create this sheer look. And I didn't do it on this one. This is the factory piece here, but I'm also going to show you how to, like some of these stockings have a little seam that run down the back. So the really old style stockings have that little seam. So we're going to put that in there as well on this other piece. So that's it. Next step, we primed it, and so we're going to get ready and mix up some of our flesh tone and go ahead and give it a shot. Okay, so now I have the part here that we want to paint. I've got it all primed up and ready to go. And so what I want to do is go ahead and paint whatever the flesh color is, whatever that's going to be. In this case, I've chosen kind of a limey green kind of a color, really, really light. I guess maybe more of a mint green than anything else. Maybe not so much a limey green, but a mint green. And I chose this just because of the subject matter. It just, you know, I've seen some people paint this in flesh, and this will work with flesh. Doesn't matter what the skin tone is. But basically what I want to do is just paint the entire leg. I'll even do the shoe. The shoe is going to be either black or white when I get done with it, so it doesn't really matter. But I'm going to paint this entire piece with my base color here. And so I'm going to do that, and then we're going to be right back. Okay, so that is the first base coat down. I'm going to let this dry, and then I'm going to hit it one more time just to get a nice even coat all the way around, and then we'll get into. I'm going to go ahead and do some of the shadows as well. I'm going to darken this green up a little bit more and go ahead and hit some of the shadow areas, because I do like to go ahead and get all of that in place first before I start putting the hosiery on top of that. So we're going to get to that as soon as this dries. All right, so our first coat has dried here, looking pretty good. I'm shooting acrylics here, just in case you're wondering. Not that it matters. You shoot whatever it is you want to shoot. Airbrush or hand brush it, whatever you want to do. The main thing here is just to get a good quality base coat down. So this one, I'm going to put one more coat on here, and then we're going to get to the shading. Just a little bit more about the paint itself. I know a lot of people use different types of paints. I kind of varied around. I've been using this. It's called Master's Touch Fine Art Studio. It's an acrylic paint. It's like $4 for this tube. It comes from Hobby Lobby. Very inexpensive, but it has a pretty good color and pretty good coverage. So I picked this up for another project, and I've used it on several projects since then. It doesn't take very much of it. It goes a long ways, especially when you're shooting it with an airbrush. And so I mixed a little bit of that. That was the, this is the olive green, what they call olive green. It's like, wow. And then this one is phthalo green here. So just a tiny bit of this to darken it down a little bit, and that's where I come up with this color that we have. So anyway, acrylic paint, but like I said, you could use any. We're going to put another coat of that paint on here, and then we'll be ready to start darkening this up and add shadows. All right, so so there we have it. Our second coat here, we're going to let this dry, and then we're going to go in and start adding some of the shadow detail. And just to give you a little side-by-side comparison there. So we have a nice, bring these a little closer to the camera here. We have a nice base color there on the right, and then the shade color here on the left. So you can see it's much bluer, but it's also much darker. If you wanted to go a little darker with that, you could also add, well, you could add some black to it, but it's best to add, say, a complementary color. So get out your color wheel and find out, okay, you're kind of here on the green-blue spectrum. What's directly across from that? That's going to be kind of a reddish-orange color. So I could add actually a little bit of like a burnt umber or something like that to this, and that would really darken that up nicely. But honestly, for this particular piece, I don't want it too dark, so I think I am good where I am. So let's fire up the airbrush again here, and away we go. Alright, so it's doing pretty good here. Shading this area. I'm actually extending my shading out a little bit here. I'm actually shading a little more just because of scale. I want to add a little bit more to the underside of her leg here and just kind of give it that appearance that this is in the shadow. So I am actually going to color this a little bit more. And that's just my personal preference for this particular piece. It's not to say you have to do that with everyone, obviously. And then I'm going to go in and pick out some of these other smaller areas and shade those. I'm also going to shade right here next to the shoe. It almost like draws a little line there for the edge of the shoe, and it ends up looking pretty good. Just kind of gives it a more three-dimensional look. Pass with just air just to dry what I have so I can kind of see where I am with this. I think I want a little bit more here. There we go. So just getting that shading in there. It's a little heavy in some spots, but that's why I've got the extra base tone. I can go right back over it. If I feel like I'm too heavy, I can go back with that. Very cool. All right, so that's it. Laying in those base colors, I think I want to add just a little bit more here. We'll get really close. Get a little bit finer line in there. And then I'm going to start pulling away from it to soften that line a little bit. Nice. There we go. All right. So I'm going to let this dry, and then I'm going to hit it with a clear sealer, and that's going to lock those colors in, and we're ready for the hosiery.